Hello, today is Friday, June 30th, 2023, and we are going over, of course, it's Book Review Friday, and the book we are reviewing this week is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So my name is Coach Alexander D, and let's get started. So the book, basically, a recurring dream troubles Santiago, a young shepherd from Andalusia, which is a place in Spain. What happens, he has a dream every time he sleeps under a sycamore tree that grows out of the ruins of an abandoned church. Obviously, the ruins abandoned. Anyway, during the dream, a child tells him to seek treasure at the foot of the Egyptian pyramids. Santiago consults a gypsy woman to interpret the dream, and to his surprise, she tells him to do what? To go to Egypt. Mind you, this man is literally in Spain, which is a place in Europe. His dream interpreter tells him to travel all the way to Spain. As he commences on the journey, he goes to town, and a strange old man named Melchizedek, who claims to be the king of Salem, echoes the gypsy's advice and tells Santiago that it is his personal legend to journey to the pyramids. Melchizedek convinces Santiago to sell his flock and set off to Tangier. When Santiago arrives in Tangier, which is not in Egypt, obviously, a thief robs him of all his money, forcing him to find work with a local crystal merchant. The conservative and older merchant obviously teaches Santiago several lessons, and Santiago encourages the merchant to take risks with his business. The risks pay off, and Santiago becomes a rich man in just a year. Santiago decides to cash in his earnings and continue pursuing his personal legend to find treasure at the pyramids. He joins a caravan crossing the Sahara Desert towards Egypt and meets an Englishman who is studying to become an alchemist. The Englishman teaches him a lot during the journey. For one, he learns that the secret of alchemy is written on a stone, which is known as the Emerald Tablet. The ultimate creation of alchemy he is meant to understand is the masterwork, which consists of a solid called the philosopher's stone that can turn lead to gold, and a liquid called the elixir of life that can cure all ailments. Santiago learns that the Englishman is traveling with the caravan to the Saharan oasis of Al-Fayoum, where supposedly a 200-year-old alchemist resides. The Englishman obviously plans to ask the alchemist the secret of his trade. As it turns out, the caravan has to spend extra time in Al-Fayoum in order to avoid violent tribal wars taking place in the desert. While in Al-Fayoum, Santiago falls in love with Fatima. Al-Fayoum, by the way, is an oasis. She lives in the oasis. During the walk in the desert, Santiago witnesses an omen that portends an attack on the oasis. He warns the tribal chieftains of the attack, and as a result, Al-Fayoum is able to defend itself against the assault. The alchemist gets word of Santiago's vision and invites Santiago on a trip into the desert, during which he teaches Santiago about the importance of listening to his intuition and pursuing his personal legend. He convinces Santiago to leave Fatima and the caravan for the time to finish his journey to the pyramid, and he offers to accompany Santiago on the next leg of his trip. While the alchemist and Santiago continue through the desert, the alchemist shares much of his wisdom about what he calls the soul of the world. Now, Santiago and the alchemist are mere days away from the pyramids when a tribe of Arab soldiers captures them. And in exchange for his life and the life of Santiago, the alchemist hands over to the tribe all of Santiago's money and tells the soldiers that Santiago is a powerful alchemist who will turn into wind within 3 days. Now, Santiago is not an alchemist. Santiago cannot turn into the wind in 3 days. So he feels alarmed because he has no idea how to do this. And over the next 3 days, he contemplates the desert, like, what do I do? On the third day, he communicates with the wind and the sun and coaxes them to help him create a tremendous sandstorm. He prays to the hand that wrote all, and at the height of the storm, he disappears. He reappears on the other side of the camp. And the tribesmen, awed by the power of the storm and by Santiago's ability, let him and the alchemist go free. The alchemist continues to travel with Santiago as far as a Coptic monastery, several hours from the pyramids. There, he demonstrates to Santiago his ability to actually turn lead into gold using the philosopher's stone. He gives Santiago gold and sends him off. Santiago begins digging for the treasure at the foot of the pyramids, but he gets accosted by two men who beat him up. When Santiago speaks to them about his dream vision, they decide he must have no money and decide to let him live. Before leaving, one of the men tries to tell Santiago how worthless dreams are by sharing his own dream. And this man's dream concerns a treasure buried in an abandoned church in Spain where a sycamore tree grows. It just so happens that the church is the same one in which Santiago had his original dream. And he finally understands where his treasure is. He returns to Spain to find a chest full of jewels and gold buried under the tree, and plans to return with it to Al Fayoum, where he will reunite with who? With Fatima, the love of his life. So now, that's a summary of the whole book. But, I mean, we will also go over the book in more detail. Why? Because at the end of the day, we want to have a clear understanding of what it is we're reading. This is one, I read this book for the first time probably 16, 17 years ago. And it's one of the best books I've ever read, because it basically talks about following your dream in what could be seen as overwhelming odds, in following your dream in what could be seen as impossible odds. So the book starts with a prologue, and the prologue, the alchemist reads a book containing the story of Narcissus. According to legend, Narcissus kneeled every day beside a lake to admire his reflection, until one day he became so fascinated with his own beauty that he fell into the lake and drowned. The goddess of the forest appeared at the lake and found the water transformed into salty tears. She asked the lake why it cried for Narcissus, assuming it had admired Narcissus's beauty. The lake replied that no, I was enjoying my own beauty reflected in Narcissus's eyes. So anyway, the book, unlike other books, the book isn't in chapters, it's in sections. And the first section, section 1, the third person narrator describes a shepherd named Santiago arriving with his flock at an abandoned church. Santiago decides to sleep there. A giant sycamore tree grows in the spot where Sarkisti once stood. While Santiago sleeps, he has a disturbing dream. We don't know what the dream is. The author never told us. Paulo Coelho, who wrote the book, doesn't share what that dream is with us. When Santiago wakes up, his flock begins to stir, and Santiago talks to the sheep about the girl he met the year prior. She is the daughter of a merchant who Santiago is visiting to sell some wool. Santiago is obviously an entrepreneurial kind of fellow. When Santiago arrives, the merchant asks him to wait until afternoon to sell his wool. While Santiago reads, he meets the merchant's daughter and talks to her about life in the village. She asks why he chooses to be a shepherd, even though he can read, that he has options. And Santiago says, the best answer is no answer, so he avoids the question, preferring instead to talk about the places he's been. The merchant's daughter is Moorish, which means she has African/Arab ancestry. And she has raven-colored hair, black hair, and he finds, Santiago is drawn to her hair. And when he sees this for the first time, he has wanderlust. He likes traveling. He decided to be a shepherd so he can travel. But when he sees her beauty, he experiences for the first time a desire to stay in one place for the rest of his life. When the merchant finally reappears, he asks Santiago for the wool of 4 sheep and tells him to return the next year. So now then the story jumps almost a year to 4 days before Santiago's next visit to the village. Again, he stays in the abandoned church, and now this time he's daydreaming about the merchant's daughter. As he urges his sheep along, he admires their loyalty. And he's like, you know what? My sheep are so loyal to me, I could literally kill them one by one and nothing would happen. And then he feels troubled. He's like, why am I even thinking such things? And that night, as he falls asleep, he has the same troubled or, dream, the same bad nightmare, I guess, that he had the year before. Santiago now daydreams and recalls the day he told his father he wanted to travel instead of becoming a priest, as his parents wanted him to be. His father told him that travelers see other lands, but do not change as a result. They just end up being nostalgic for the past. His father said the only people of their class who travel are shepherds. The next day, Santiago's father gave him 3 gold coins to purchase a flock of sheep. He encouraged Santiago to travel, but said Santiago would learn that their own countryside, which is Andalusia, is best. As he recalls the scene, Santiago senses that his father also would have liked to travel, but could not afford to do so while raising a family. Santiago begins to wonder if his sheep enjoy discovering new roads and sights each day as he does. But then he's like, nah, these creatures only enjoy eating. He compares the flock's single-mindedness to his own preoccupation with the merchant's daughter. Suddenly, Santiago remembers that an old woman in the nearby village of Tarifa interprets dreams, and he decides, you know what? Let me go visit this woman. Now, all I have, summarized right now, all I've gone over is literally the prologue to the book. But what it does, in my opinion, is it gives us clues about what to expect in the story. It tells us basically what's coming. So the Alchemist at the beginning says the book containing the story of Narcissus belonged to someone in the caravan. This tells us what a journey might occur over the course of the tale. The Alchemist also expresses surprise that the author of the book extended the popular legend of Narcissus past its traditional conclusion. Why? Because the usual version of the legend ends as Narcissus dies looking into a lake. This is to illustrate the danger of vanity. In the version Santiago reads, what happens? We learn that the lake felt upset that Narcissus had drowned because it enjoyed doing what? Feeding up its own vanity while looking into Narcissus's eyes. This idea that vanity can serve a good cause despite all its perils will become important as we go through the book. The Narcissus story also readies the reader for lack of a better term, the magic that we're going to experience as we read The Alchemist. It introduces us to a world where things that are not necessarily logical happen, things that are metaphysical can happen. So almost as soon as we learn about Santiago, we get to know that he isn't an ordinary shepherd. Why? Because if we know anything about days gone by, we know that shepherds are generally illiterate people, which means they can't read, they can't write. Santiago obviously is literate. Not only is he literate, he reads regularly. And this, of course, we can see because he even surprised the merchant's daughter. For him, shepherding presents an unusual career path. Why? Because he wants to travel. And we get to discover that obviously he traveled across to wherever to go sell wool and so on and so forth. So we can see that his choice isn't bad. He is successful at his job. He decided to go, uh, in a way that most people who are educated don't go, but he was successful at it. He has regular customers, he purchases books as he pleases, and he seems to be very happy with the life he is living. Now, the only thing that we see that is out of the ordinary for Santiago in the prologue is his attraction to the merchant's daughter, who the narrator says acts as the first signal that Santiago's life will never be the same. So the mundane, he was living, he had a small dream, which is I want to travel. He got to do that. But then he got to the point where he had a dream that is a bit bigger, which is this woman is everything. I want to be with her, which actually made him question his past choices of being a wandering shepherd. So the other signal in this prologue is Santiago's troubling dream, which is not initially explained, but always occurs while he sleeps under the sycamore tree growing in the church. This mysterious dream repeats itself in two consecutive passages a year apart. So the year before he slept under the tree, he had this dream. The year after he slept under the tree, he had the same exact dream. And this serves as an important piece of what? Of foreshadowing. Santiago obviously enjoys his life as a shepherd, not only because it allows him to travel, but also because he loves his sheep. Santiago notices his flock's ability to find contentment through what? Through food and water. And he almost envies the fact that they never have to make any decisions. Now, think about it this way. We've all heard the term sheeple. In my opinion, Santiago's sheep are sheeple, people who are excited and happy just to have the barest minimum food and water. Anyway, Santiago thinks that happiness for a human being may be more complicated. On the other hand, Santiago feels frustrated by the fact that his sheep can't share the appreciation of travel. He's like, I'm taking these animals everywhere and they're not too excited. He imagines that he could kill his sheep one by one and the flock wouldn't even notice. So, what is this allusion to? Again, same thing with humanity. The violent image of Santiago's sheep shows that sheep live blind to important truths and they're not to be emulated. But that's how human beings are. People who work jobs, for example, people who go through 9 to 5s, they're confidently going about their business, not knowing that their entire worlds could change with the decision someone else makes somewhere about their financial futures. So Santiago, anyway, wonders if all humans are like his sheep, looking only for physical contentment and living without ever appreciating life. Later, this tension becomes very important to Santiago. Even though he has traveled across Spain, he still feels very limited. He still feels like he hasn't done enough. He wonders if his relatively local travels, comforting stack of books, and obedient flock play the same role in his life that food and water play in the lives of his sheep. Again, this is typical of most human beings. Santiago wondered if his local travels, entertainment, which is books, and this was obviously before the internet, and obedient flock, which is the little life, comforts, life comforts, and creature comforts, are what we have as human beings. But Santiago lived before our time, obviously. So if Santiago's thoughts made him believe that he must seek out a higher purpose if he wants to be truly happy. So this is all section 1 of the book. Now in section 2, and I'll give you the summary, and then we'll go into the analysis. In section 2, upon meeting Santiago, the dream interpreter takes his hands and begins chanting a gypsy prayer. When he was a boy, Santiago was scared that he will be captured by gypsies, and he worries the fear will return. Now, funny story, when I was young, I grew up in Europe. I grew up in Ukraine, actually. And obviously, as you can see, I am not exactly pale. And the way it was back then, the way it still is in many parts of Europe, is you have wandering groups of gypsies. I think they're called Roma, who go through the countryside and go through wherever. And They're nomads. And whenever the gypsies would come to the city I live in, I'll be out and about, say in the park with my nanny. As soon as my nanny hears the gypsies are coming, because gypsies are generally dark-skinned. As soon as my nanny hears the gypsies are coming, she'll quickly whisk me and take me home. Why? Because she was worried that the gypsies might kidnap me, saying I'm one of their own. I mean, obviously that never happened, but that was just. So when I read this about Santiago and his gypsy fears, that kind of reminded me of my youth. And I wasn't worried about being captured by gypsies, but obviously people around were. So anyway, as the gypsy is reading Santiago, he's holding Santiago's hand. Santiago takes solace in an image of Jesus in the room, but he's still shaking. His hands are still trembling. When Santiago realizes that the dream interpreter detects his nervousness, he pulls his hands away and says he doesn't want a palm reading. He's like, no, I don't want this. The dream interpreter replies that she can help him and that she will still charge him even if he leaves early. Santiago at this point decides to go ahead and explain and get an explanation for his dream. So in his dream, Santiago is in a field with his sheep when a child starts to play with them. The child grabs Santiago's hands, transports him to the pyramids of Egypt, and tells him that he will find a treasure near them. As the child begins to say the exact location of the treasure, what happens? Santiago wakes up. After listening to the dream interpreter says she will not charge him for her service, but that she wants 10% of the treasure when he finds it. Santiago laughs in disbelief. He's like, this lady is crazy. Share what treasure? But he agrees to swear that he will share his treasure with her. Then the dream interpreter goes on to insist that Santiago travel to the pyramids and find the treasure. She tells him with all the conviction conviction she can muster that she knows that the treasure really exists because it was a child who pointed it out in the dream. Skeptical, Santiago leaves disappointed, but relieved he didn't have to pay anything. Santiago now, all this is happening in the town of Tarifa. Santiago buys a new book. He rests in town to wait out the hot sun before he keeps moving on. He's reading his book when an old man who resembles an Arab approaches him. Santiago ignores the man initially, but the old man persistently questions Santiago about the book until Santiago relents and talks to him. Santiago is surprised because the old man actually knows the book. The old man says it's the same as most other books because it describes how people end up believing the world's greatest lie. Santiago is like, what's the world's greatest lie? And the world's greatest lie is, and listen to this, if you haven't listened to anything else I've said during the course of this Zoom, listen to this. The world's greatest lie is that nobody can choose his own destiny or choose his own fate or personal legend, as the man puts it. Santiago says no, he controlled his destiny by becoming a shepherd instead of a priest. During their conversation, the old man introduces himself as Melchizedek and says he is the king of Salem. Santiago has never heard of Salem and thinks that this old man is not okay. The old man says that if Santiago gives him 1/10 of his sheep, he will tell him how to find the hidden treasure. Now, Santiago guesses that the old man works with the dream interpreter in a gypsy scam, because gypsies are known to be very interesting people. Because Santiago is like, how else could this old man that I have never met in my life know about my treasure? It's not possible. And then guess what Melchizedek does? Melchizedek writes the names of Santiago's mother and father in the sand with a stick. Challenge is, Santiago never told the gypsy the names of his parents. So anyway, let's look at this chapter. The first section of the book, Santiago was introduced to us as a happy and successful, although perfectly complacent young shepherd who is very good at his job, who is very satisfied with his choices, and who maintains a youthful crush on a local Moorish girl. To Santiago, he was living his best life. However, in this section of the book, Santiago begins to feel that a whole world exists which he has not seen. And though Santiago may be something of an adventurer compared to his parents and the people around him, even though in his circle he might be more adventurous than them, he may still resemble his sheep in that he is complacent. So during his meetings with the gypsy and Melchizedek, Santiago glimpses possibilities for his life that he had never even considered. And the reader has some early hints that Santiago will have to choose between the comfort zone and his personal legend. The thing here is that, like in life, the occult imagery associated with the gypsy, the occult imagery associated with the, when she was palm reading, shows that Santiago has entered into a metaphysical territory, for lack of a better term. The fact that the gypsy also keeps an image of Christ shows that, all faiths are connected, that even though things might seem like signs, it doesn't mean that faith that already pre-existed is no longer relevant. Obviously, Santiago's hands still shake. So it's not like he's completely comforted about the picture or with the picture of Christ. Santiago, like most of us, when something new and extraordinary is revealed to us, feels he's not worthy. Because when the gypsy told him he has to go to Egypt, he felt shocked. When Santiago left the gypsy, he was like, nah, this is not meant to be. Again, in this business, people come in here, they're super excited, they're hyped, they're whatever, and then they're like, nah, it's too good to be true. And then Santiago thinks he got one over on the gypsy by promising her 10% of his treasure. He's like, yeah, I got her good. Now, the encounter shows that Santiago does not place any importance on his dreams. He still sees them as mere, things that happened. Yes, he may have chosen to be a shepherd instead of a priest, which is he pursued a dream, but traveling all the way to Egypt in search of treasure because of a dream remains beyond his personal belief level. So instead, what does Santiago do? He immediately goes back to being average and ordinary. Happens here all the time in our business. He gets a new book, drinks some wine, and goes back to thinking about what? The merchant's daughter. Melchizedek, the old man Santiago meets, provides the push that Santiago needs to convince him to pursue his dream. In this business, a lot of people get some sort of push, but they still ignore it. Push might be, you live here, we've just told you you're going to be successful, things are going to work out, you're excited, and you get home and you see you have a bill. People don't look at that as, I need to do this business. They look at that as, I can't do this, it's too troubling or whatever. So anyway, Santiago has no interest in Melchizedek, but Melchizedek gets Santiago's attention by saying what? He knows the book he is reading. And then, because he said he knows the book he's reading, Santiago is like, okay, we have an area of commonality. So, and then the Melchizedek basically tells him that the book demonstrates the world's greatest lie, that fate controls our lives more than we do. Now, think about it this way. Santiago is literally reading a book about fate controlling our lives more than we do, which is reinforcing what he already believes, that, I'm not destined to be rich. I'm not destined to find buried treasure. Fate is I'm a shepherd. I'll remain a shepherd. Anyway, Santiago feels he understands Melchizedek's point. After all, he chose his own path and became a shepherd. Santiago still suspects, obviously, that there was a scam when this man who calls himself the king of Salem speaks about his dream and demands some of his sheep in return for a clue about the treasure. Melchizedek obviously changes his mind when he reveals the names of his parents. Melchizedek also mentions the name of the seminary that Santiago attended, and other things that Santiago had never shared with anyone. What does this mean? This means that Melchizedek shows that he has supernatural ability. Santiago is still skeptical, but is at least persuaded that Melchizedek is wise. So Santiago feels convinced that he should listen to him. So that's it for this week. Next week, we are going to cover the third section and beyond. Guys, again, if you're listening to this and you have a chance to read this book, I strongly suggest you do. I promise you this book will change your life like it did mine. Thank you. God bless you. God bless.